is going to be the light in apartment 17. There was one window in the building that was always lit. It belonged to apartment 17. The strange thing was that apartment 17 had been empty for almost 3 years. Mara noticed it on her first night in the building. She had just moved into apartment 14, 3 floors below the roof, and was standing at a kitchen window at nearly midnight, trying to convince herself that the strange noises coming from the pipes were normal. The building was old. Buildings made noises. That was what the landlord told her. The pipes knocked. The floorboards creaked. The wind pushed against the windows. Everything had an explanation. So when Mara looked across the narrow courtyard and saw a warm yellow light glowing from the window of apartment 17, she didn't think much of it. Not at first. She simply assumed someone had moved in. The next morning, while carrying a box down the stairs, she mentioned it to the woman who lived on the second floor. Apartment 17? The woman asked. Yes. The woman stopped halfway through tying her shoe. Not trying her shoe. That's strange, the woman said. Why? She looked up at Mara. Nobody lives there. Mara laughed. Someone must, she said. The woman shook her head and said, nobody has for years. Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she smiled politely and continued downstairs. That night, at exactly 11:47, the light came on again. Mara was reading in the bed when she noticed it. She walked to the window, and there it was, a single warm light behind a thin curtain. Nothing else. No movement, no television, no shadows. Just a small yellow square floating in the darkness. She watched it for a while. Then at midnight exactly, it went out. The following night, she waited for it. 11:45, nothing. 11:46, nothing. 11:47, the light came on. Mara smiled despite herself. It was almost comforting. Every night after that, the same thing happened. 11:47, light, midnight, darkness. She began to build her evenings around it. She would make tea, turn off the lights, open her book, and wait. Sometimes she wondered who was inside, an old woman perhaps. Someone who worked night shifts, someone who didn't like the lights in the rest of the building. Eventually she started imagining a person sitting beside the window reading. She never saw them, but she imagined them anyway. Then one Thursday night, Mara noticed something different. The curtain was open. She could see directly into the room. There was a chair beside the window, a small table and a lamp. Nothing else. No bed, no furniture, no person, just the chair. Mara stared at it. The chair was facing the window, as if whoever lived there had been sitting and looking directly at her. Lord. She stepped back. The light went out. She waited. Nothing happened. The next morning, Mara asked her landlord about apartment 17. He became unusually quiet. Why do you ask? was on the table. There was food in the refrigerator. And the apartment? Empty ever since. Mara swallowed. Why hasn't anyone rented it? The landlord gave a small, uncomfortable smile. Because people don't stay. That night, Mara didn't look at the window. She told herself she wouldn't. She read until 11, then she went to sleep. At 11:47 she woke up. She didn't know why. Her bedroom was completely dark. She lay still. Then she heard something, a soft sound. Tap, tap, tap. Mara opened her eyes. The sound had come from her bedroom window. She slowly turned her head. 3 gentle knocks again. Tap, tap, tap. She got out of the bed. Her hands were shaking. She walked toward the window across the courtyard. Apartment 17 was dark. The light hadn't come on. Mara looked back at her own window. There were 3 small marks in the condensation. 3 fingerprints. One on the inside of the glass. She didn't sleep that night. The next evening, she stayed at a friend's house. The evening after that, she stayed late at work. She avoided her apartment until after midnight, but eventually she had to go home. On Sunday night, she returned at 12:15. The building was silent. She climbed the stairs, opened her door, and immediately noticed something. There was a light on in her kitchen. Mara froze. She was certain she had everything turned off. She walked slowly toward it. On the kitchen table was a small piece of paper. She hadn't left it there. There was only one sentence written on it. You keep looking at my window. What? Mara stared at the words. Then she heard a sound behind her. A chair scraping gently across the floor. She turned. Nothing. Her bedroom was open. The hallway was empty. Then from somewhere above her, she heard the sound of a window opening. She looked toward the ceiling, and suddenly she understood. Apartment 17 wasn't empty. It was waiting. Mara ran outside. She didn't return until morning. When she finally went back into the building, the landlord was waiting for her. He looked exhausted. You saw it, didn't you? Mara nodded. He didn't ask what. Instead, he handed her a key. Go upstairs. Why? Because you need to see something. They climbed the stairs together. The door to apartment 17 was at the very end of the let us start the second story now. The second story is going to be The Last Seat by the Window. The train was almost empty when Emma stepped onto it. It was a Sunday evening and rain had been falling since morning. She had no particular reason to be travelling. She simply felt like getting on a train and going somewhere. She walked through the quiet carriage until she found a seat beside the window. Outside, the platform slowly disappeared behind her. Emma rested her head against the glass and watched the town turn into fields, then forests, then little villages with warm lights glowing in their windows. For the first 20 minutes, she did not speak to anyone. Then the next station arrived, and an elderly man got on. He looked around the carriage, noticed the empty seat opposite to Emma, and smiled. "Do you mind?" "Not at all." He sat down. For a while, they simply listened to the sound of the train. Click, click, clack, clack. Eventually, the old man looked out of the window. "Beautiful evening for a journey." Emma smiled. "It is." "Where are you going?" Emma thought about it. "I don't really know." The man laughed softly. "Those are sometimes the best journeys." They talked for the next 1 hour. Nothing important. They talked about weather, about books, about best places to get tea. The man told her that when he was younger, he used to take random trains whenever life felt too complicated. "I never knew where I'd end up," he said, "but somehow I always came back knowing what I needed to do." Emma looked at him. Did it work? He smiled most of the time. Eventually, the train began slowing down. The man stood and picked up his coat. "This is my stop." Emma smiled. "It was nice talking to you." He nodded. "Sometimes you don't need to know where you're going." He paused at the door. "Sometimes you just need to keep moving." The doors closed. Emma watched him disappear onto the platform. Then she turned back toward the window. The rain had stopped. A golden sunset had appeared between the clouds. For the first time that week, Emma smiled. She still didn't know where she was going, but somehow she wasn't worried anymore. She opened her phone. There was a message from her mother. "Are you coming home for dinner?" Emma looked at the passing fields. Then she typed, "Yes, I'll be home soon." And as the train carried her toward home, she rested her head against the window again. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. For once,